Long before the stars became fixed maps for the ancient wayfinders, there lived a woman named Hina, whose hands were never still, and whose heart was as restless as the deep Pacific tides. Hina was a daughter of the islands, born in an era when the breath of the gods still rattled the palm fronds. Yet she carried a burden that felt heavier than the volcanic stones of the mountains. Her existence was measured not by breaths or heartbeats, but by the rhythmic, soul-crushing thumping of the wooden beater against the sodden bark of the sacred mulberry tree. In those primordial times, the production of kapa cloth was the lifeblood of the people, a grueling ritual of survival that demanded every ounce of a woman's physical and spiritual essence. Hina was whispered to be the finest kapa maker in all the great ocean, her cloth so ethereal they felt like morning mist, and so resilient they could catch the salt-heavy mountain winds without tearing. But beneath the surface of her mastery, Hina found no solace in the labor that shackled her from the first light of the morning star to the dying embers of the cooking fires. She lived within a family lineage that viewed her divine talent as a mere utility, a biological machine designed to clothe the warriors and cover the sleepers without complaint. Her husband was a man of hardened clay and heavy steps, whose voice carried the weight of tradition but lacked the lightness of love, never once seeing the prayers Hina carved into the bark. To him and the village elders, Hina was the silent provider, the one who ensured the warmth of the tribe while her own spirit shivered in the cold shadows of neglect. Every evening, as the tropical humidity pressed down like a wet blanket, Hina would turn her gaze to the silver orb hanging in the heavens. Wondering if there was a realm where a woman could simply be, the moon did not just shine. It vibrated with a cool, magnetic frequency that stood in defiant contrast to the scorching tyranny of the sun and the suffocating smoke of the hearth. In the quiet of her mind, she began to architect a bridge made of pure moonlight, a shimmering staircase of silver light that defied the gravity of her earthly obligations. One fateful morning, as the hibiscus flowers began to unfurl their crimson petals, Hina realized that the walls of her life had become a cage she could no longer inhabit. With hands trembling, not from fear, but from a sudden violent hope, she gathered her sacred tools, her most intricate beaters, and the finest strips of walk bark ever harvested. She carried no gourds of water or bundles of dried fish, believing with a fierce, quiet desperation that the gods of the upper air would sustain a soul seeking its own truth. Hina journeyed to the forbidden edge of the shore, where the rainbow bridge, the Anu was said to touch the earth, a portal between the dusty world of men and the crystalline heights of the spirit. As her bare feet made contact with the ark, the colors erupted in a symphony of heat and light, the very molecules of her being humming in harmony with the ancient power of the path. But the sun, a jealous and watchful monarch who tolerated no escape from his domain, looked down and saw a mere mortal attempting to bypass the cycle of earthly toil. With a roar of solar wind, the sun unleashed a blinding wave of heat, liquefying the rainbow bridge beneath Hina and sending her spiraling back into the humid embrace of the jungle. "You are bound to the soil and the salt," the sun bellowed through the shimmering heat haze, "and you shall labor under my fire until your skin withers and your bones become the white sand of the beach." Hina lay in the damp ferns, her body bruised, but her will forged into something harder than basalt. For she knew the sun's reign was only half of the cosmic truth. She waited in the deep silence of the grotto until the world turned to charcoal and the fiery, judgmental eye of the day finally dipped below the western horizon. Then rose the moon Mahina, growing larger and more luminous than Hina had ever witnessed, casting a carpet of liquid mercury across the dark, undulating muscles of the sea. Hina pushed her small outrigger canoe into the surf, paddling with a fierce, rhythmic grace not toward a distant island, but toward the very point where the moon's light met the water's edge. As the shore receded, the ocean itself began to transform, the salt water turning into a viscous sea of starlight and the air filling with the scent of frozen iron and ancient jasmine. The canoe began to lift, the bow pointing toward the zenith as the laws of the earth fell away, replaced by the magnetic pull of the celestial mother. Higher she climbed, the atmosphere crackling with static electricity, until the very stars seemed to reach out and touch the carvings on her wooden beaters. Hina felt the transition in her lungs, the air becoming thin and sweet, a divine oxygen that tasted of forgotten dreams in the cold, sparkling clarity of the void. Below her, the massive archipelago of her ancestors shrank until the great volcanoes looked like tiny anthills lost in a boundless fire-colored tapestry. She saw the migration of spirit whales and the deep currents and the glowing ley lines of the planet that only the birds and the gods are permitted to see. The ascent was a marathon of the spirit, but Hina found a new, effortless power in her stroke. A rhythm she had perfected through decades of forced labor now serving her liberation. The moon expanded from a light in the sky to a vast, shimmering continent of pearl-colored dust, ancient craters, and mountains that glowed with their own internal fire. When the outrigger finally settled onto the lunar surface with a sound like silk against silk, Hina stepped out into a silence so absolute it felt like the first day of creation. Here, there were no voices to command her, no eyes to judge the speed of her hands, and no sun to burn the map of exhaustion into her skin. In the center of a great silver-walled crater, she discovered a magnificent banyan tree, its roots drinking from the light of the stars, and its branches offering shade made of pure peace. Beneath the glowing canopy of this cosmic tree, Hina sat upon the fine silver dust and laid out her walk bark, beginning to strike her beater once again. The sound was no longer a dull thud of misery. It was a resonant musical chime that echoed across the craters, a heartbeat for a world that had been waiting for a soul. The kappa she wove on the moon was a miracle of texture, infused with the essence of the Milky Way and the soft REF, LECT, ED, light of the distant Earth. As she worked in the low gravity of her new home, tiny fibers of the radiant white bark would break away, caught by the solar winds and drifting toward the planet below. These celestial fragments descended through the clouds, appearing to the sailors and farmers below as the wispy, altitude cirrus clouds that foretell a change in the weather. Back in the village of her birth, her disappearance created a void that no amount of prayer or ritual could fill, as if the light had gone out of the very air. Her husband stood on the darkened shore for many moons, realizing in the biting cold of the night that he had starved the heart of the woman who had kept him whole. He looked up at the full moon and gasped as he recognized a familiar silhouette, the curved back and the steady, focused movements of the weaver he had lost. Hina had ascended to her true throne, becoming the Mahina Hina, the eternal guardian of the night and the patron of all who create beauty in the dark. She became the patron saint of the overlooked, the grandmother of the restless, and the silent ally of every woman who looks at a horizon and sees a doorway. Her legend spread like a wildfire across the Polynesian Triangle, moving from the lush valleys of Hiva, Oe, to the frozen tips of Aotearoa. Every tribe whispered her name differently, yet every version told of the woman who refused to let her spirit be ground into the dirt. In the folklore of the islands, she is the Lady in the Moon, not as a figure of tragedy or exile, but as a monument to ultimate sovereignty and self-determination. She stands as living proof that the heavens are not a barrier, but a destination for those brave enough to build their own vessel. Hina began to take an active role in the lives of the voyagers, using her kappa-making fires to illuminate the dangerous reefs for the night travelers. She remembered the terror of the open sea and the loneliness of the navigator, and so she made the moon a lighthouse for the lost. With a gentle tilt of her silver hand, she would spill light onto the dark water, creating a glade of gold that led the canoes safely to hidden lagoons. In the modern age, when the elders gather the youth under the stars, they tell them to close their eyes and listen to the stillness of the night. If the wind is right, they say you can hear the clack-clack-clack of Hina's wooden beater, a celestial metronome keeping time for the universe. It is a teaching that work, when reclaimed from the hands of oppressors, becomes the highest form of spiritual expression. Hina's banyan tree provides her with all she needs. Its leaves are her food, its sap is her ink, and its presence is her sanctuary. She is nourished by the dreams of the people below, drinking in the hopes of the children and the wisdom of the old ones. She is never cold, for she has woven a cloak of moonlight so thick and warm it can withstand the absolute zero of the stars. Yet, the umbilical cord between Hina and the great ocean was never truly severed. She remains the conductor of the planet's watery orchestra. She feels the heavy pulse of the tides in her own veins, the rhythmic inhalation and exhalation of the Pacific that shaped her ancestors. When the spring tides surge against the cliffs, it is Hina, leaning down from her crater, reaching out to touch the water she once paddled through. When the moon vanishes into the new phase, it is because Hina has retreated into the deep shadows of the banyan to begin her most sacred weaving. The indigenous peoples of Oceania view her as the ultimate matriarch, the one who fled to the sky to ensure there would always be a light in the window for her children. Some legends speak of her pet owl, a creature of silver feathers that flies between the moon and the earth to gather the prayers of the faithful. Others say the lunar halos are actually the steam from Hina's dye pots, as she colors the bark with the juices of the stars. Her flight was not an act of abandonment, but a necessary evolution, proving that one must sometimes leave the world to truly save one's soul. She took the humble tools of a village woman and transformed them into the instruments of a goddess, sanctifying the labor of millions. In the spiritual geography of the Pacific, the moon is a vibrant garden of industry. It's a place where the soul's work never ends, because it is joy itself. Hina embodies the concept of mana, the divine authority that allows a person to command their own destiny against all odds. She whispers to us through the moonlight that when our lives feel too small, we must broaden our vision to include the entire cosmos. There exists a rare night-blooming Sirius in the islands, a flower that opens its heart only to the moon, releasing a scent that can intoxicate the stars. Legend says this flower is the physical manifestation of Hina's laughter, a gift sent down to those who keep the night watch. It serves as a reminder that the most profound beauty often requires the darkness to be fully revealed to the world. Hina's influence is woven into the very DNA of the Pacific arts, from the rhythmic patterns of the tattooist to the chants of the hula. Each movement of the dancer's hand is a ripple in the silver pond that Hina created when she landed in the sky. Modern sailors, even with their satellites and screens, still feel a primal comfort when Hina's face emerges from behind a cloud. She remains the anchor for the wandering spirit and the compass for the heart that has lost its way. The great forests have thinned, and the silence of the night is often broken by the roar of the jet engine. The glow of electric cities has tried to compete with the stars, masking the ancient pathways of the sky. But the moon remains an untouchable fortress of peace, a reminder of a time when the world was governed by deeper rhythms. Hina sits there still, her eyes reflecting the blue marble of the earth, her hands moving with the precision of a master. She has watched the arrival of the great sailing ships, the steamships, and the birds of metal that now cross her sky. She has seen the fires of war and the lights of celebration, yet she never falters in her task of creating light from shadow. To Hina, the history of man is but a single night's work, a fleeting pattern on a piece of cosmic cloth. When you feel the weight of the world's expectations crushing your spirit, call upon the memory of the woman who climbed the moonbeams. Remember that your worth is not a commodity to be traded, but a sacred fire to be tended in the privacy of your own heart. Hina did not ask for permission to be free. She simply paddled until the world could no longer hold her back. This is the heart of the legend, the realization that the only limits that exist are the ones we accept as truth. As the midnight hour approaches and the shadows grow long and deep, turn your face toward the silver light of the heavens. Seek out the dark patches on the moon's face, the ancient banyan tree, and the woman who found her sanctuary within its roots. Breathe in the cool lunar air that drifts down on the night breeze and feel the strength of Hina entering your spirit. The Pacific continues to sing her name, a hushing sound of Hina Hina that cleanses the sand and the soul alike. Her story is a lantern for all who are currently navigating their own dark night of the soul. Her journey provides the coordinates for those who are ready to depart from the shores of their own limitations. And so Hina remains the weaver of the night, the navigator of the void, and the eternal queen of the silver path. May her light illuminate your darkest hours, and may her courage give you the strength to sail toward your own destiny. For in the soul of every living being, there is an outrigger canoe waiting for the tide to turn toward the stars. We hope you enjoyed this journey into the heart of Oceania. Comment, like, share, and subscribe to Channel Storycraft Studio for more legends that light the way.